Hello and welcome to Tattvadeep, Conversations and Explorations. Our series on mathematics has come to an end. The next subject we will be exploring is language. For the first episode in this series, we sat down with Professor Ghil'ad Zuckermann, Chair of Linguistics and Endangered Languages, School of Humanities and Faculty of Arts at the University of Adelaide. His work revolves around contact linguistics, lexicology, and the study of language, culture, and identity. And he's also an elected member of the Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies. His years of wisdom and insights can be found in his books, Revivalistics, From the Genesis of Israeli to Language Reclamation in Australia and Beyond, which was published in 2020. 2019's Barngarlidhi Manoo, Speaking Barngarla Together. 2003's Language Contact and Lexical Enrichment in Israeli Hebrew. We talked about how language can help us become better at thinking and expressing ourselves, why it's important to revive a dying language, and what it would take to do so. We also talked about how language evolved and made room for us humans to lie, offend without touching, and also be funny. The 4 revolutions, and perhaps a 5th, that language brought about in our world. And although similar in the ability to communicate, how human language is creatively different from non-human language. We hope this conversation can help the listeners see the tattva, or true essence, of their own mother tongue, along with the values and meanings embedded within the structures of the different languages of our world and their strong interconnectedness. Hello and welcome, Professor Zuckermann. Thank you for giving us your time on Tattvadeep. Yes, so Professor Ghil'ad, I think the right place for us to start is to understand your work from a linguist to now a language revivalist. Can you please take us through your journey and your experiences?
Well, I have found my Ikigai. You know, in Japanese, there is this idea of Ikigai, which is raison d'être. It's the intersection or the overlap between what you're good at, what you love, what the world needs, and what you're paid for. Mm. Usually people do not reach their Ikigai. They end up with an Ikigai. For example, if you're an accountant, as a generalization, you might be good at what you do. You are paid a lot of money for it. The world unfortunately needs it, but do you love it? I'm not sure. If you're a guitarist, you love it. The world needs it. You're good at it, but are you paid for it? Well, sometimes. So Ikigai is very hard to find, this kind of, overlap. And I have found my Ikigai. And if we... You said that you found your Ikigai. And you are... it's a Japanese word. It's a Japanese word. So I assume you found the word with how it states what Ikigai is in the Japanese language. Now, do you think that apart from many different reasons that might be keeping people from finding their Ikigai, one reason can be the fact that a word similar to the word Ikigai does not exist in their language, or that they do not know it? And that perhaps it goes back into saying why, as common men and women, we should take our languages seriously, because they've got some good instructions in there. I think that often when you study many languages like me, so, I'm fluent in 13 languages, but I know many other languages. Wow. When you study languages, you often encounter a lexical item that refers to a concept or to a feeling or to something that you have already thought about, but you did not have a word for it. Ikigai is one of those words, because raison d'être, reason to live, has a similar meaning, but this kind of analysis that I've just given you about Ikigai, which you might argue is over interpretation of the Japanese term, is very beautiful, exquisite, and succinct to allow for something that I was looking for, but I did not have a tag for it. I did not have a signifier for it. I'll give you another example. When I studied Yagan in Tierra del Fuego, it's a language in the Chile, Argentina, in South America. There is a beautiful word there, which I think it's a famous word because it's very succinct. It's Mamisapinatapai with a sha, which exists in Welsh. Mamisapinatapai, the two L's, it's a little bit like Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd comes from Pink Floyd. The two L's, Mamisapinatapai, has a meaning which is a concept that I had when I was 15, but I did not have a word for it. To look one at the other, hoping that the other side would initiate something that both of us really want to initiate. But so far, nobody has had the guts to do it. Nobody has had the guts to initiate. As a linguist, I can analyze the concept mam isapi ata apai as following. Ma is a prefix. Mam is the allomorph, it's called. It's before the E, which is a vowel. Okay. Ma becomes mum. Okay. So mum is kind of a prefix. And together with apai at the end, because I told you mami sapinat apai, it has kind of a reciprocal sense. So it's something that happens to both of us, not just to me. Isapi is the root, the lexical root, and this is to be at loss. Isapi. Right. Then you have the n, which is a suffix, which is a stative suffix. It's a state. Okay. And then you have mami mam islapi ata is achievement. You're trying to achieve something. Okay. And then apai, as I said earlier, together with mum and apai is a reciprocal. So you can see that you have to be at loss, you have a state, you have achievement, and you have reciprocity, and together it refers to a referent, which means something in the world that exists. In this case, it's a concept that I had in my mind, but I did not have a word for it. So this is one of the reasons why people are passionate about languages. And by the way, imagine that there is a language without a word for passion. Does this mean that the people will not have passion? Absolutely not. They will have passion, because passion is something, however, they might not be able to describe their feeling properly. And in some instances, some people might be less likely to be aware of the passion. So it's a little bit like the word blue. In Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, in ancient Latin, in ancient Greek, there was no word for blue, because blue, if you think about it, it's a color that is unimportant in nature as a generalization. Of course, you have a blue wren, which is a bird, which is very beautiful. I see it every day almost when I walk from Waterfall Gully to Mount Lofty in Adelaide, Australia. Australia Australis, the south of the south, because Australia means south. Okay. So I'm in the south of the south. You can see blue in nature. I saw a monkey in Namibia or in South Africa which had blue balls, blue testicles, but so it exists. But when you eat a tomato, nobody cares whether it's blue. You only care whether it's red, because if it's green, you can die. You can die from whatever there is there. So you need to know red. You need to know black and white, of course. So black, white are the basic. Then red. Then you need to know green, yellow, Blue comes later because it's not important for survival. When you eat, you don't need blue. Now, coming back to Hebrew, when people describe, I'm not talking about Israeli, but of course we have a word for blue. We have a word for light blue as well, but I'm talking about the ancient language of Isaiah. When you describe the skies, you would say the sky is black or the sky is white. Now, for a period, there were researchers who said that the old Hebrew people or the old Greek people, they were Daltonists. They did not see color. They were colorblind, so they could not see the blue. This is absolutely false. They could see exactly what you can see and what I can see. However, because they did not have a category for it, they kind of described it with a different category. So this is what I mean, that language does not dictate the way you think, but it certainly influences the way you think and the way you talk about your feelings. Another example is when you have bridges, you know, in some languages you have gender, like grammatical gender. In my mother tongue, Israeli, the word for bridge, gesher, is masculine. In Italian, the word for bridge, ponte, is masculine. In German, however, the word for bridge, Brücke, is feminine. And my friend, Lera Boroditsky from California, she actually discovered that people whose language has the grammatical gender for bridge, which is masculine, describe bridges as sturdy, powerful. Whereas people whose language has bridge as feminine describe bridges as elegant, as beautiful. What is this other than the influence, which is subconscious in this specific case? Because obviously, if you ask people with languages like German, you know, do you believe that bridges are, why do you believe that they're elegant? They will never say because it's a feminine. You know? I mean, this is something that linguists know, that hoi polloi, the masses, the normies, they do not care too much. I mean, what is a linguist? A linguist, it's a little bit like a geologist. A geologist sees a stone that you or me, you know, we might think, oh, what is this stone? It's nothing. We can just maybe throw it. But they can actually, the geologist sees the history, the entire history, and the layers, and which period, according to a stone. The same with a linguist. You know, you take one word, and you can see the entire existence, politically, socially, culturally, mentally, health-wise, through a word. I am very much a fractal or maximus in minimis person. I look at one word and I can see the entire picture. It's a little bit like a hologram. When you look at a hologram, every pixel has the entire hologram. So you can see, like, if you see a horse, you look at one pixel and then you see a horse, and then there are many, many horses. So this is, for me, language.
Right.
Now,
there are so many amazing chapters that we've opened here, right? And pardon me as I try to string my thoughts together, because there are a lot of things I'd like to know from here. So one thing that whenever I listen to linguists, speaking about language, I somehow feel like, although I know that the schools of different of linguistics and different linguists have a different opinion as to why language exists, where it comes from, but somewhere maybe the biology of it, we all understand that we have the tool required to produce the sounds we do. And okay, we just leave it at that. But when you look at a word like this, the Argentinian word, which means the reciprocative word, which you were just telling me about earlier, like you also said, it seems to be present physically. And maybe the evidence of it was so prominent. Maybe the people who were devising, the linguists of the time of that place, were able to see something happen across people and over, that they maybe felt driven to create a word for it, so that it is known that this happens, this exists, something like that. But at the same time, so what I want to know is, does this mean that who we are is where language comes from? How we behaved determined the language that was formed. Because also, if you look at the thoughts of philosophers of language like Wittgenstein, they say that where language ends, thought ends. But say and I don't know where language ends, that Hindi is vast, Sanskrit is vast, English is also vast. I don't know where the language ends. But if, say, I reach a point in English where English ends for me, all right, I can move to say German, and then my thoughts can expand. So there is no end to learning about who we are and what the world is about through language. What do you think about this?
Firstly, when it comes to the first point that you said, I agree that language can reflect reality, in the sense that if you go to Persia, ancient Persia, and you ask them, what is this word? They tell you it's nahur. What is nahur? It's a camel that will not give milk unless you tickle its nostrils. For somebody to come up with such a word, this person needs to know about camels, something that if you live, for example, in New York City, you would never have the ability to even imagine such things. Think about aliens in Hollywood films. They all look like ugly human beings, or most of them look like ugly human beings, despite more than 3 billion years of DNA evolution, which in my view is ridiculous. Because I don't think the world is infinite. I think the world is finite. And therefore, if you do meet an alien, I think that the chances that the alien would look like ugly us are almost zero. So it just shows you how limited our imagination is. So coming back to the camels,
you'll be happy to know this. Maybe there is a film called Annihilation. And there is, Annihilation, that's the film. And there the director has decided, he is saying what you're saying. So maybe this thought is catching up, that we do not know what the aliens will look like. So he says, because we do not know what they look like, he just turned them into this strange mutation, which is beautiful and, destructive at the same time. And they're unable to describe what it is. It looks nothing like us. So he said, okay, yeah, so we've never seen it. So we don't know what they look like. Let's not make them look like ugly, whatever.
No. Now, with regard to Ludwig Wittgenstein, which I read a lot as a United World College student in Italy, I read Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus and also Philosophische Untersuchungen, which is philosophical investigations. Also, after that, I studied Wittgenstein at Tel Aviv University in Israel. One of the sentences that he said, which corresponds exactly with what you've mentioned, is wovon man nicht sprechen kann, darüber muss man schweigen. So whenever one cannot speak, one should remain silent, except that I have many friends who, instead of reading it as schweigen, they misheard it as schreiben. So wovon man nicht sprechen kann, darüber muss man schreiben. So whenever one cannot speak, one should write. Now, I think that Wittgenstein talked about the limits of language, not in the sense that, like English has only 1 million words and, at a certain point you reach all the words and then this is the limit. I think that it was more, like sometimes people You can see it in politics. People can speak and speak and speak, but they say nothing.
No.
But what you mentioned in your question is absolutely true about the fact that when you are a linguist, there is no dull moment, in the sense that, firstly, you can go to any lecture in the world. It can be about the most boring idea, and instead of listening to the bullshit that they say, you just analyze their lexical choice. Why did he use insightful and not perspicacious? Why did he use, if a knife is not sharp, he said it was blunt. So he's British, he's not American, because of course any American would have said dull. Oh, but this guy is Canadian, so what does it say about his, etc., etc. So you can actually analyze any speech in the world, in any language, if you're a linguist, even if you do not know the language. I mean, like, so I spent some time in Namibia, and, you know, there are many languages with, even 2 languages in the world have, these are clicks. I could analyze which clicks does this language have, even if I do not understand the language. So it's like a phonetic analysis. So there is no end to what linguists can do. And in fact, 1 million words, believe me, nobody knows all the words in English. And even if you, let's say, know 50,000, which is a lot, I mean, kind of a normal bogan, you know, bogan is, do you know the word bogan?
No, never heard.
Bogan, it's very funny. I'll tell you a very funny story.
Yes.
I went to an opera called La Sonnambula, the one who cannot fall asleep. You know? And I was introduced to somebody called Peter Hoban. And I said, oh, Peter Hoban, what a beautiful surname, just like Russell Hoban, who said, and look, I quoted, and let me see if I can quote to you too. Language is an archaeological vehicle, full of the remnants of dead and living pasts, lost and buried civilizations. The language we speak is a whole palimpsest, human effort and history. Palimpsest means you write on top of another written text, you know, and as a historian, you're interested in what is written behind, you know, first. At this stage, Peter Hoban tells me, oh, you are amazing. You are the first person in Australia to get my surname correctly. Everybody thinks my surname is not Hoban, but Hogan. Like Paul Hogan, like Crocodile Dundee. And then he tells me, and this is the funny thing that I wanted to tell you. Yesterday, I received a phone call from Optus. Optus is like a telephone company in Australia. I'm with Telstra, there are Optus, there are others. And the person who had an Indian accent. In Australia, many telemarketers are based in India. And he told me that she said to him, would you like to upgrade your plan, Mr. Hogan? So then he told me, I told her, it's not Hogan, it's with a B. And then he told me that she had asked him, would you like to upgrade your plan, Mr. Bogan? Now, Bogan, instead of Hoban, she said Bogan, Now, Bogan in Australia means redneck. Somebody who is like a fuckwit, low education, usually kind of rude, driving a horrible car with a special kind of, look, it's not usually racist, but racism, I have to say, of Bogans is not based on nastiness. It's based on lack of knowledge. So, I mean, many Bogans are actually not bad people, but there is this bogan. I actually added the word bogan to the Oxford English Dictionary several years ago. You can check it, what they say about it. It's very hard to define, as you know, for a dictionary. Now, why did I mention the word bogan? Because I mentioned the hoi polloi. Do you remember what I said about the normies, the bogans? Do you remember what I said about the bogans, the hoi polloi, the normies?
I can't seem to recall. Sorry, Professor.
Ah, yes. I said that bogans would use 500 words, 1,000 words. When you read a Chinese newspaper, you only need 3,700 characters, which, simplistically speaking, 4,000 words.
Okay.
So English has 1 million words. It doesn't matter that most of them are not Germanic, but rather Latin, French, etc. But English is a wonderful vacuum cleaner. It takes, it takes words. Tsunami, okay, tsunami, Japanese, harbor wave. English would take, guano. You know what guano is?
No.
Guano is the shit of the bat. Is it guano?
Oh, I don't know. Okay.
It's from Quechua.
Okay.
Which, English, let's say it took jacaranda. You know jacaranda, this beautiful
flower.
Violet. Yeah. It's from Tupi-Guarani in Brazil, in Latin America, etc. So English loves taking words. But coming back to your point, Disha, you are right. You finish studying a language, there are 7,000 minus 1 languages that are alive and kicking, that are waiting for you to be explored. A fortiori, there are thousands of other languages that are already sleeping beauties, dreaming beauties, that are waiting for you to assist their community, their custodians, to be revived. So there is no end to what one person can do throughout his or her life. In fact, what I feel, and this is kind of tragic, is that I don't have enough time to revive all the languages that I would have loved to revive. I mean, just think about it. Language reclamation, especially when we talk about a dreaming, sleeping beauty, meaning no native speakers, is a life project. One language, one person, at least. So if I am only one person, and very, very much one person, I'm not like, like in theory, I can only focus on one language and that's it, which I do.
Yeah. And even Professor Zuckermann, so linguists are interested in language, people who take up studying language professionally. Then there are enthusiasts of language who want to become speakers of different languages. And then there are just regular people going about their day, doing their thing. So even if it is not in-depth interest in languages per se, in different languages, even if we get into our own languages, I think there's a lot of wealth of information that we are ourselves blind to. Like, for instance, in Hindi, when we meet someone, we say namaste. Now, you know that, namaste. And you see there's a physical thing to it, like you bring both the palms together and you bow down. And the word namas means bow, and te means to you. So I bow down to you. So there is a whole concept behind the fact that you start off on a good note. You start off, now you can take it into several thousand branches of interpretation. Like when you meet someone, you meet them respectfully. You meet someone, you don't know their story, so you bow down to what you don't know, or whatever, however you would like to interpret it. But it gives you a way of looking at life. So to me, when I hear it first, like Dr. Lera, who you mentioned earlier, when she says that language influences thought, right? Language influences how we think. It on the face value of it, it makes total sense, right? Even if I'm not immersed in linguistics, if I'm not an lover of languages, that thought makes sense. That's why a lot of people watch the TEDx talk also, probably appealed. But then there are people who say it isn't so. So there is always this differentiation that exists in all fields. You take math, there are ideas that people agree on, and then there are those who oppose it. In language also, this seems to be one of those things that some linguists say, yes, it is so, and here is why. Some say, no, it isn't, and here is why. So I would like to understand your point of view, and also understand, why do you think people who oppose this way of looking at language, why do they do it? And if you can also tell me, you use the two words like influence and dictates. Now,
yeah.
Okay, maybe I have a totally different question here. So we leave it aside for now. But if you could just focus on these things that linguists agree upon, ways of looking at language they agree upon, and things that they disagree about. Could you please elaborate?
So the question that you're asking me is something that that Benjamin Lee Whorf, W-H-O-R-F, asked more than 100 years ago. And he created this Sapir, so it's Edward Sapir Whorf hypothesis, or Whorfianism, sometimes we call it. And this is that language dictates the way you think. Now, there are two ways of reading Whorfianism. There is the narrow or the strong way, which is language dictates the way you think. And there is the broad, the weak way, which is language influences the way we think. And of course, there is, on the other side of the spectrum, as you perspicaciously said, some linguists who would have argued that, look, grammar is universal, it's not cultural specific, it doesn't matter much, the language, etc. We all have our thoughts, and it is independent of the specific language, etc. The reason why there's so many people in all these extremes, including the middle ones, is that linguistics is not mathematics, or at least it's not mathematics as we believe mathematics is, because I know, because I studied mathematics at the university, mathematics also has its fuzzy F-U-Z-Z-Y parts, but you know what I mean? Like I'm using now, linguistics is not 2 + 2 = 4. Linguistics is much more interesting than that. And many times at conferences, when you read articles, even if you're a professor of linguistics, you can say to yourself, oh, this other professor of linguistics, what a fuckwit, what an idiot. Like how can they believe such bullshit, etc., etc., etc. At the end, the only thing that remains is the way that somebody either convinces you or does not convince you. But it's not 2 + 2 = 4. In this specific case, the question of Whorfianism, I personally believe that the truth is in between cultural relativism, as in the strong Whorfianism sense, and universalism. I believe that the truth is in the middle. On the one hand, we have universals, and I do believe that there are some universals, definitely not as many as Chomsky believes, Noam Chomsky. And on the other hand, I do believe that there are many cultural specific phenomena, but definitely not like strong Whorfianism. For example, I told you earlier, if my language does not have a word for passion, I'm going to be passionate nevertheless. Who cares if my language... So,
even though it might be limited, right? How I understand is how I act it out. And because if I don't understand it very clearly, because the word does not exist, my expression of passion could be what? It could be limited to something. and it could be limited in itself. You think?
No, but passion is a feeling. It's the word passion, which has to do with suffering, is just meta. It's a meta in the sense that it's above the feeling. The feeling itself exists. And when I gave you the example of Mami Shapinata Pai, I had this feeling when I was 15. I was shy, you know, and I wanted the girl to do something, but I did not dare offer it. Yeah, I remember it, but I did not have a word for it. So according to Worfianism, which is the strong, the narrow Worfianism, if language dictates the way I think, then it is likely that if I do not have this concept in the language, then I might not be able to think about it. But what I'm telling you is that it's untrue. However, I don't think that everything is universal. I think that there is a lot of influence. And I think that if you say German, it is likely that a woman born might think, oh, you know, like even subconsciously that, you know, if she's a woman, she's not supposed to be the chairman. It's only for the man, you know. I remember as a child, you know, I went to the hospital. I had pneumonia. And the word for nurse in Israeli, which is the result of the revival of Hebrew, I call it Israeli because it's a hybrid language. It's a cross-fertilization between Yiddish and Hebrew. The word in Israeli for a nurse is achot, which means sister. Achot, sister. In fact, in English as well, you say that, you know, Stephen Hawking married his sister, meaning his nurse. By the way, he divorced her. I knew them both, by the way.
Okay.
I had lunch with Stephen and his wife, who was his sister, meaning his nurse, not his sister as a brother and sister.
Yeah.
But I remember when I went to the hospital, it was called Yoseftal Hospital in Elat, the southernmost city of Israel. But at the time we had Sinai Desert as well, so now it's part of Egypt. It was before Israel returned Sinai Desert to the Egyptians. So when I went to Yoseftal Hospital, I met a nurse, and he was a man. And I said to my father, but he cannot be a nurse because he's not a sister. I mean, he's a brother, you know. Like, so then my father said, yeah, he's a sister of the male gender. So achot means achah. So he's a sister.
So open your world.
Say brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's very funny. I mean, nowadays we use the word ach, which means brother, by the way. It's a funny thing. But I remember the feeling, oh, this is weird. I mean, like, why is he not a woman? I expected a woman. So, of course, what I'm trying to tell you, Disha, is that it is possible that political correctness has good intention, and sometimes it has some benefits because it changes the language to the benefit of the minorities, etc. However, what happens when somebody comes and tells me, well, I don't like the word boycott? I said, why? Because it has a boy in it. It has nothing to do with boys. So I girl caught people who start telling her story instead of history and all this bullshit. History is not his story. It's a etymythology. So this is why boycott, girl caught.
What is etymythology, if I said that right?
Etymythology is etymology and mythology together. Etymology is the science of where the word comes from. So, for example, say the word artichoke. You know artichoke? Do you eat artichoke?
No, I've not eaten it, but I know this vegetable or fruit.
It's a horrible thing, but I love its etymology. I hate artichokes, but I love their etymology. So artichoke comes from, this is the etymology. I'm giving you the etymology. Artichoke comes from artichocco, which is in northern Italy. Archichocco, archichoffo, al carciofo. It comes from Spanish. Al carciofa. It comes from Arabic Spanish, which comes from al kharshuf. Al, which means the in Arabic, and kharshuf, which means artichoke. Al kharshuf is the etymology, the etymon of artichoke. The folk etymology or the etymythology is that artichoke comes from ardishoki. Ardi means earthly, and shoki means thorny, earthly, thorny in Arabic.
Wow.
And in fact, this is how they say in Arabic today in Lebanon and in the Galilee. The word for artichoke is ardishoki, which means earthly thorny, because it comes from the earth
and it's thorny.
However, ardishoki comes from artichoke, not the other way around. It's a phonosemantic matching. So they took the word artichoke and they found a specific two words within Arabic that reminds them of the sound of artichoke. This is called phonosemantic matching, but this is the etymology, whereas the etymology is Arabic, but al-kharshuf, not ardishoki. Another etymology is, when Muammar al-Qaddafi, who was the Libyan leader, based his belief on Khulusi, who was a professor in Iraq, that Shakespeare was an Arab named Sheikh Zubir. Sheikh Zubir.
Oh.
This is an etymology. Of course, he was not an Arab, but he kind of etymologized it. Another etymology, I don't know why I decided to give you Arabic examples, is when you say influenza, influenza?
Yeah.
Influenza. So Arabs, they say, oh, it comes from anfil'anza. Anfil'anza is the nose of the goat in Arabic. And the nose of the goat is always wet, as if it suffers from influenza, or at the very least from Omicron, apropos coronavirus. But coming to Hindi, I have heard of rasbhari. Have you heard of rasbhari?
Yes.
What is rasbhari? What does it mean?
So something that is full of juice. So it can be raspberry.
Apropos Pondicherry.
Yes.
I heard rasbhari as a phonosemantic matching of raspberry. Of course, raspberry has nothing to do with rasbhari, but because rasbhari sounds like raspberry, and also it has a meaning that is very relevant to raspberry. It's full of juice. I mean, every raspberry is full of juice. This is a beautiful etymology that results in a new word.
It's so fascinating. And what this reminds me of, when we were in college, and I was studying, I studied psychology for a little while, and they gave us this example. On the board, they wrote these words: NXT, NXT, EXT. NXT is these three letters they wrote. NXT. NXT. Now
next.
Exactly. And they asked us to guess what the word is. And we said it's next. And they said, did you realize the spelling is not NEXT as you know it? But it's very similar to what you know. So your brain is just, for me, it's just fascinating.
Look, I mean, right? I can send you an entire letter which is written without vowels and in English, and often without some without vowels. It's like ticket, TKT, ticket. Everybody knows it. Yeah. And sometimes without some consonants, and you will be able to read it. And sometimes metathesize, so instead of next, it'll be text, so the T comes before the X, but you will still be able to read it, because we can easily read through extrapolation. We don't need the entire thing. So even when you ask me a question, if it is in response to something that I said, I know the answer before you finish the question. I mean, there is a funny thing about it. Like, I don't know if you saw it on Facebook or whatever. They show an African man, maybe African American, and it's like in the Big Brother, and he's asked. This is a Big Brother, like the virtual reality TV, Big Brother or something like that. You have two options. Option A, you're going to spend 7 days with your wife in the same room. Option B, before they say option B, you hear the guy saying option B. So he kind of decided that he wants B rather than A. although he didn't hear the rest, you know, like, I mean, in this specific case, it's very funny because, you know, but what I'm saying is that we extrapolate, and language itself has so many redundancies.
Important point that I think I picked up from what you said. And this is something that has always interested me. And maybe there are other people also out there who might be interested in this. You said that when I ask you a question, the answer is made up in your, you know what you're going to say, and then it's a matter of laying it out.
Oh, no, what I meant was that sometimes, not always, when I say something, say, and it requires a question, and then you start the question, according to what you start, I might be able to extrapolate the remaining. Do you understand what I'm saying? Not always.
So complete the other person's sentence, in some sense.
Say it again.
Complete the other person, the speaker's sentence, sometimes in some sense. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, so language anyway is full of redundancy. So I remember when I explained to my students, I mean, you mentioned Hindi. Let's take the word kal. You know, the word kal in Hindi, it means tomorrow, but correct me if I'm wrong, it also means yesterday.
You're right.
People, you know, like Aussies, they say, oh, this is crazy. How do they know whether it's tomorrow? I said, what do you mean? According to the context. What's a big deal? Like if I told you I'll come tomorrow in English, if I tell you let's say kal, I'll come kal, so you know it's tomorrow. I saw you kal, you know it's yesterday. So in other words, it's plus minus one in absolute value. Now I don't know. Do you say parson for after tomorrow?
Yes.
In some Indian languages, you will use parson or parson, or I think in Bangla there is something similar, and it's practically plus minus two in absolute value, and you know it according to the context, which means that in English or in Israeli or in Italian or in Arabic there is redundancy. So there is a lot of redundancy. For example, I haven't eaten any food, you know, until now. I mean, of course, some people say to eat food, but of course, you know, eat is automatically food. What I'm saying is, or sometimes you have double negatives, you know, the famous joke about the linguistics professor who goes to Columbia University and says, in some languages, double negatives means negative, and in some languages it means positive. But there are no languages in the world in which double positives means negative. And somebody from the end of the class says, yeah, right, or yeah, you know, so apparently there is double positive, which is negative. So, I mean, languages are so pragmatic, and sometimes you know it's just one word and you know the entire thing. I mean, if you speak Hindi and you know a proverb, you can just say the first word from the proverb and then everybody knows, and then you don't need to continue, you know. But you can continue if you want, but it's redundant because the other person already got it. You know, like
but Professor, if are these redundancy, and if language is not just reduced to phrases and idioms, if everybody's spoken phrases and idioms, I think it will make matters quite boring. But the fact, if we are talking about redundancies, do you think these redundancies are a part of the evolution of language? Because language is like clay in our hands. I'm sure language has a life of its own, which is, I don't know if I should be speaking to a linguist about it or a philosopher of language about it, but language seems to have its own entity, you know, without the speaker. At least this is one of the schools of philosophy. During my research, I found out an Indian school of philosophy believes, I think sometime in the second century, they believe that language exists and they find us. So nothing, you know, that we are being used as, let's say, vessels.
Language exists regardless of, I mean, this sounds very fishy. However, Noam Chomsky and many others, they believe that language is an innate faculty, in the sense that you're born with the linguistic device, if you want, and you just need to be exposed to the specific triggers of the specific language. So if I took you when you were born to Tokyo, you would now speak Japanese perfectly. If I took you to Adelaide, you would have spoken like an Adelaidean in South Australia. So if this is what they mean, that language exists regardless, yeah, I mean, there is something here, of course, to accept. However, language evolved, or what emerged, not evolved, emerged as a very powerful tool for humans. And the difference between humans and non-humans, I mean, we are all animals, we know. The difference between us and animals is that we can actually say sentences that we have never uttered in our lives. So for example, when I talk to you now and I say, Disha Daniel, I like your beautiful sari, which has the light behind it, which reminds me of the Japanese concept of komorebi. Komorebi is the light that you see beyond trees. You know, when you look up, you see the trees and there is a light. So this reminds me of komorebi. This sentence I have never uttered in my life. I have never put the word Disha together with Daniel. I have never said Disha. I said Disha, which in Israeli means one thing. Yeah, but I've never said Komorebi together with Sari, etc., etc., etc. This generativity of language, or the fact that what Chomsky talks about recursion. So I see Disha, who is married to X, who is the father of Y, who is very beautiful, etc., etc. I can continue this forever, recursion. So I bought the bag that was bought by another person, that was stolen from this, that was this. So I can always add and add and add and add. This is also generativity. This does not exist in animals. In animals, you do have communication, absolutely, but you don't have language, and language means human language. This is how I understand language. Now, how did language emerge? I believe that it happened 70,000 years ago by Homo sapiens sapiens. It can be more, of course, but say 70,000 years is minimum. And it was the first time that instead of kind of using my hands to say, you know, or you know that some people, when they write, they move their tongue. Have you seen? I had a friend in the army. They write like that. Do you know these people?
Some children, yeah.
What? This is no, but it's also among adults. You know, yeah. This is this, in my view, the explanation of how language emerged. So practically, I'm saying it simplistically, but a guy who said, "Okay, come," you know, he said, okay, you know what? Instead of using my hands in order to communicate, I can do other things. I can make fire. I can do, I mean, you know, you can think about it. But because I shrieked just like a monk, now I can actually talk. So I can talk. Be careful, there's some tigers coming, etc. Now, this is the emergence of language. Now, what does it allow us to do? Two things. This is the first emergence of language. I'm talking emergence of speech, of human speech. Firstly, it allows us to offend without touching.
Words hurt, like sticks and stones.
Words hurt.
Yeah.
Another thing it allows us to do, and this is the beauty, if you want, or the tragedy, it allows us, for the first time in history, to lie about the past and the future. Because we can lie about the present if we are, say, a bird. This is called the Handicapped Principle. If there is a bird of prey that runs after two birds that are small birds, like nightingales, one bird begins to sing, It's a lie because this bird is not that strong. But then the bird of prey will go after the one that doesn't sing, because the bird of prey says, "Oh, if this bird can sing, it means it's very strong. So I will go after the other one." This is also a lie if you want, but it's not a lie about the future. It's not a lie about the past. It's just, or I can do. Let's say I'm very weak, and you come to eat me as a, like. So they say, "Oh shit! Look at his teeth. He's very dangerous." This is a lie. I'm not that dangerous. However, if I am now speaking a language, I can say, 10 years ago, I killed 1,000 people with my knife. Or I can say, in 10 years, I will have 2,000 wives. Yeah, I'm talking now in terms of the primitive man, etc. Not that people do not kill these days. On the contrary, they kill a lot, unfortunately. But what I'm trying to explain to you is the main advantage that this miracle or tool that is absolutely a tool by humans. So whoever told you or whoever said that language exists just like that, and then the humans are, it's
No. What I think what is happening is across, we are living today like 2,100 years after, and like for 70,000 years, as you're saying, language has been evolving without us. The point I understand is that when people begin to understand something, I think they just bring their ways of looking at it, and then we can all build on it. So this was proposed, and some other ideas were proposed, and it's always, I think it's fun to explore all ideas. But what I want to understand also from you, see, Professor Zuckermann, language, unlike mathematics, so is very personal. So when I did my husband and I did the first series of interviews, it was on mathematics. It was something still, so we were not good at, we could not do, we did not pursue it after school. Language is there with us every day. Language is there with us every day. So it's a very personal experience. It's a personal phenomenon. It's somewhere, if the device is somewhere inside, right? We're all born with a language brain, whatever. So now when I think of it on a personal level, say if I know that over there water has fallen and I should not go there because I might slip. I'm in my house. And then my husband walks in, and then I have to tell him, don't go there. Water is there. Be careful. You might fall. So this need to tell another. If I have no need to tell another, I'm with myself. I know I should not go. I know I should not eat this fruit that looks green because I'm, I don't know how I know that. But whatever it is that I know for myself stays with me. The moment the need for me comes to relate to someone, maybe speech comes about. So does that, if we're talking about it so many years after it was invented, discovered, found, whatever, but does that say something fundamental about language? That apart from lying, apart from how creative we get, because if you come and do this in front of me, or like a gorilla, whatever, there is something creative still. Yeah, you're trying to look bigger, you're trying to scare off and you're trying to defend yourself. You've got to be creative. Okay, ठीक है. Then
yes, but in language, you are much more creative than when you tell your husband not to go there, because you could have actually told your husband not to go there even if you were a bird. So birds shriek even when there is a drone, like there is a drone now, and some linguists have found that birds have a special cry for a drone, which is new, and the cry resembles what they shout when they see an eagle. So don't go there. There is a drone. Of course, they don't say this entire sentence.
So defense, essentially defense.
Exactly, but right? This is not language. This is not human language. Human language, and by the way, apropos mathematics, I just wanted to tell you that Einstein, as in Albert Einstein, he said that a good mathematician is somebody who sees the links between mathematics and reality. This is what he said. But of course, for most people, advanced mathematics is totally eviscerated of reality. And you're right that as opposed to that, language is something that every human being, except severe disabilities, every human being is born to speak, not to write, to speak. And speech is an amazing tool that creates new creativity that did not exist prior to human language. And this huge creativity is not telling your husband, don't go there. It's not saying, I'm big, I'm strong. Rather, it is the creativity of sense of humor.
Yeah.
Linguistic sense of humor is something that only humans have.
Oh, and I love it.
I have never heard a cow talking to another. I've never heard of two cows talking to each other, two female cows, and suddenly there is a beautiful bull coming to the herd, and one says, moo, and the other one tells her, that's exactly what I wanted to say. If there was such a cow, had there been such a cow, I would have been a vegan, because it means that cows, if this is a hypothetical, cows have this linguistic sense of humor, which is kind of the epitome of Menschlichkeit, of humaneness, of the humankind. We can write poetry and we can make jokes. Jesus saves, Moses invests. Jesus saves, Moses invests. So Jesus saves is ambiguous because it saves like he's a savior, but also he saves money. Moses invests. This is something that cows, dolphins, whales, birds cannot do. This creativity can result in the fourth revolution. The fourth revolution is technology. Let me explain. I only discussed the first revolution, which is the emergence of speech, which is 70,000 years ago plus. Then 5,200 years ago came the second revolution. And the second revolution did not come to every language. In fact, most languages did not have that revolution. This is writing, the emergence of writing. Why did writing emerge? Because of agriculturalization, urbanization, and most importantly, because of fucking thieves. Because of thieves, yeah. I hope it's okay that I use some colloquial language, you know. So thieves, why thieves? Because wheat was sent from Iraq, from Mesopotamia to Israel, for example, in return for some salt or whatever. And they received only half of the quantity. And they said, why? What happened? And somebody said, you know, on the way, there were some thieves who stole half of the wheat. And then the Israelis did not, they thought that this is what you send them, only the half. So then came, for the first time in human history, for the first time in history, in any history, writing 4 units of wheat. So we write on top 4 units of wheat, or we write on a piece of paper 4 units of wheat. So you need to give us.
But what about those holy scriptures, Professor? Aren't they older than that? Like whether written in Sanskrit, or this writing had come about, right?
5,200 years ago, nothing Sanskrit, nothing holy scriptures. What you're talking about is much, much younger than 5,200 years ago. The entire history, as you know, like in China, when I say history, so when you write, not prehistory, is, I mean, if nobody knows what happened in China 5,000 years ago. When it comes to culture, I mean, writing, nothing, zero. 5,200 years ago is when writing emerged. Before that, there are no holy scriptures. The only gods, and of course there are 12,000 gods, as you know, that people have believed in. So the cartoon, the joke is, don't worry, your God is the best one. I mean, that's the joke, right? Don't worry, there are 12,000 gods, but yours is the best one. Don't worry. I mean, this kind of explains to you why more and more people are atheists. How can you believe in God when there are 12,000 different gods?
Well,
it's ridiculous.
Right, but if I have to pull you back into this language, there was something that I wanted to.
The second language.
What I'm saying is that the part that we can be creative with language, that we can be creative with, it's something that came about after language came about. We say if we had invented a hammer, maybe with time we would have learned what all to do with it. But first would come the hammer, and then we'd maybe use it slowly, we'll maybe use it simply. But with time we will learn how to get creative with it. That itself shows the capacity of our brains to be creative. Then if language comes as a tool, clothes come as something, food comes as something, we tend to get creative. And today we are there where we can discuss here things that are that we take for granted in language. But there was a time when language must have been so like a fresh dewdrop or a leaf, just first word uttered or first word heard. So back then the need
but there were only 4 revolutions, and the revolution is the time in which there is a huge change suddenly. But you're right. Until the revolution, it's very gradual. So, for example, when I told you about the first revolution, I'm sure there was somebody like doing some fire and say, ooh, 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 like be careful, and then they make fire. But then they say, and before that he was like making fire, and he said, the sign language, etc. So it's gradual, but the moment you start talking, this is a revolution. Now, the moment you start writing, so of course at the beginning it was only 4 units of wheat or whatever wheat. It was not poetry. It was not how many women the king had or how many soldiers the king killed, which is eventually what happened. Like when they write down the king's activities, etc. resulting in and at the end you have Shakespeare, etc., etc. I mean, it is actually an evolution, but then you have a revolution, and the revolution allows you for a very quick evolution. So what is the difference between revolution and evolution? The difference is time. The difference between quantitative and qualitative, the difference is quantitative. So qualitative means that within a very short period of time, you have a huge evolution. For example, language revival is a revolution, because within the revival, which is like 30 years, 50 years, a lot is happening, much more than with a language that is alive and kicking and continues, like Italian, influenced now by American, but it continues from Latin. This is very kind of evolutionary, very easy. Where revolution is something more. Now, I want to come back to these revolutions. The second revolution is writing. Writing allowed us to pass information to people who are totally far away from us. Now, this is a huge revolution. So speech allowed us to pass information about the past and the future, as opposed to animal language. But writing allowed us to pass information about the present to somebody who is on the other side of the world. Now, the third revolution was type printing. And type printing, this is Gutenberg, Johannes Gutenberg in 1453, I think, 1453, somewhere. This is a revolution because the church can now brainwash many people at the same time. It's not just writing, you need many people to write again. Now they can send like thousands of books everywhere, so everybody knows who Jesus Christ is. I'm just taking the Christianity as an example. This is a revolution that resulted in standardization and spelling. Think about it. Even Shakespeare could care less about spelling. Disha, D-I-S-C-H-A, why no C? I mean, like in German, it would have S-C-A, who cares? Shakespeare, he spelled in 5 different ways. In the 1976 Australian Bureau of Statistics survey, in which people were asked, what kind of religion are you? And you had like Hindu, Christian, Jewish, Islam, Muslim, etc. People could choose like V on Christian, but then they asked, what's your denomination? And the denomination, they didn't have all the denominations. You actually had to write down your denomination. Now, I'm asking a question to you now.
Mhm.
How many spelling variations do you think that Presbyterian Australians used when describing themselves? So in other words, you're a Presbyterian, you're an Aussie. There were several millions Aussies at the time. Nowadays there are 24 million, but at the time there were many less, but still millions. How many spellings did you have for the word Presbyterian? Presbyterian. Presbyterian. It's only one.
I know the spelling.
Sorry?
I know the spelling. Yes, Presbyterian. Yes.
How do you spell it?
Presbyterian.
Okay. How many other spellings do you think there were? I mean, including this one.
They can be, you can spell press with PRESS, right? And B can be BI and TE or TARYN. Like there are so many combinations.
Yeah, and you can spell with Z maybe because you say Presbyterian.
Presbyterian, yeah.
Yeah, so how many do you think?
So far, maybe, I was thinking a lot more, but maybe 10, 12, 15 ways.
Now listen carefully. I researched it. 383 different spellings
Yeah.
of one word Presbyterian, which shows you that even after the standardization, when it comes to people, and the joke says dyslexics are people poo, meaning dyslexics are people too. People poo. But of course, these are not dyslexics because Shakespeare was not a dyslexic. I mean, it's just that nobody could care less about spelling. Nowadays, when you have this huge revolution, the third revolution, you need to spell correctly, because if you are the Oxford University Press, so for example, when I published this book recently, Revivalistics, Oxford University Press, they asked me, okay, do you want to be British or American? If you're British, you need to be consistent. You cannot write color, C-O-L-O-R. You need O-U-R because it's British. Now, if you do British, then be consistent, you know, like...
yeah, I know
So this is called standardization. And the fourth revolution, which is changing the world, and this is the revolution that allows you and me to become zombies. Zombies, my term for zombies, you know, zombies.
Okay.
It's called the technological revolution. The technological revolution allows you in Pondicherry, India, to interview me in Adelaide, Australia. This is unbelievable, because now it's not that I send a book that I wrote to you. Actually, you can interview me and I can tell you
what it is
in
about.
real time.
Yeah,
in real time. You know, this is a revolution. It's the big data. It's a CNN. It's a Facebook. It's a revolution. It allows us a lot. And of course, it also allows us the political correctness gone mad, the wokeism, you know, like whatever you want, the canceling, you know, somebody says
positive,
one thing.
negatives, however you want to look at it. There are always both sides. But there is, Professor Zuckermann, tell me something. Do you think that there is, I don't know if we should call this a revolution. So we speak, we have a mouth and we can, but we also listen, right? We have listening, and then there is a difference between the two. Isn't there shouldn't there be a revolution in the way we hear? Because often there is a language to hearing also. And I think a lot of problems in the world also come from how, if we understand ourselves incorrectly and we understand other people incorrectly. So there has to be a hearing revolution.
So look, this is a fascinating point. Firstly, I can tell you that in my case, the ears are also my seeing organs, because I use them for my glasses. So look, You see that without the ears, I would have not had.
Well, your glasses will not sit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the ears are not only for hearing, but also for seeing. But I think that what you're saying is very perspicacious. Hearing is something which is needed even more in light with the speech first revolution. The first time that people speak, they need somebody to listen. And you know, I have a cartoon somewhere here, the emergence of language, and you see like the men ooh 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 ooh, and the woman saying something like we need to talk, and then they said the emergence of language, you know, ooh ooh ooh, you know, the man is very primitive. It's kind of a funny cartoon, but the point is that when we speak, and I do not want you to interfere, to disturb me, I use a filler. Is a word that you use, like like I said to her, like it has two functions.
Yes.
And this is fascinating.
Yes.
First function, time to think. The second function is to signal to the other side, don't talk. Double function. Because if somebody says, I tell her, you are not allowed to speak.
Really, this is so insane, because sometimes if someone goes on a train of and they're not moving on from there, a lot of people might just jump in and say, hey man, I think you're not clear about
this is a violation of the filler.
You're talking about it culturally or linguistically, like as a violation?
Now, very good point. In Aboriginal culture, traditional Aboriginal culture, there is no such thing, because you talk and the control is in the hands of the hearer, not of the speaker. In the Western culture, when I talk, I expect the people to listen to me. In an Aboriginal traditional culture, you can talk and then nobody is there because they disappeared, because they decide whether to listen to you or not. Another thing which is fascinating is that when Aboriginal people, they would never look at you in the eyes traditionally. I'm talking about tradition, because to look at the eyes is considered disrespectful. This is why many Aboriginal people in court in Australia, they suffer, because when the judge asks them something, they look like in the sky, and the judge says, oh, maybe he's lying. Maybe, yeah, like he's not, he's disrespectful. Actually, he is respectful. If you look at the eyes, so look, there are so many differences. When I ask an Aboriginal person a question, they do not answer. Let's say they do not answer. 4 days later, they say, Ngadlu. I say, what Ngadlu? You ask me about, and you think, oh, that's weird. No, it's not weird, because it's not dyadic. Our culture is dyadic. You ask me a question, I answer. If I ask you a question,
dyadic, sorry, yes?
Dyadic means you ask, I answer, I ask, you answer. If I ask you a question and you don't answer, I will say, oh shit, maybe I said something which is offensive, maybe I asked a question I should have not asked. In traditional Aboriginal culture, absolutely not. It's not dyadic, not dyadic. So you're right. Maybe the guy who says, maybe he comes from a culture which says, if you say, then he actually wants you to empathize with him and to continue the sentence, and then he knows you're listening to him. Whereas in my culture, if somebody says, he wants or she wants to have some time to think, so I should shut up and not. Now, in Chinese, they use a lot nge or naige, which means they're this. There was a famous case in America recently that a professor at the University of Southern California used this as an example of a filler. He said in Chinese, he said, "neg," ne. And there were some people who said, oh, this is politically incorrect because, and we feel very offended that he used the word neg because they thought of the word nigger, which the N-word, which is very political. Of course, he just gave them an example in Chinese and they had no right whatsoever to be offended. But what is shocking is that this guy was fired from the course. He was not allowed to teach the course because people were offended by his example from a foreign language. What does it show you? It shows you two things. Firstly, political correctness gone mad. Mad. And America, unfortunately, sometimes is characterized by that. And secondly, it shows you the monolingual mindset, which is very, unfortunately, prevalent in America, in Australia, in New Zealand, and I would say, unfortunately, even in England. So especially in English-speaking countries that are not, they do not have other languages like you have in India. You have English, but you have so many other languages.
More than 100.
How many?
So
90.
So, Dr. Sagar, Professor Zuckermann, tell me this now. You tell of one story. There's so much that you're saying that it will take me a little bit to just unpack it. So someone who's monolingual, someone who speaks one language, they are, you're saying, thwarted. They're limited to a certain way of perception. But okay. If we take it also, then you also tell the story of the Bangla people. I'm trying to draw these analogies to ask my question in a proper manner. So where you went and studied their language in south of Australia, and you used the book written by a dictionary written by a German person who had visited them about 140 years earlier, and that was your only reference book that you had all the while in order to teach them their language, which you call them the stolen generation. There's a whole amazing story that you tell about it, and now they speak English. And now when you go and tell them, say for example, you told them that the seat of emotions in Barngarla language, my friend, Aboriginal friend, in Bangla is the belly, is the stomach. They, who have now for over 70 years, I think, have been tutored, influenced, dictated, whatever word you'd like to use or is the right way. They have learned to think in that language. They said, no, heart is the seat of emotions. Now that is not, I don't know if that is just an idea that comes from the English language. Even when I look back in Hindi, Dil, Hriday, whatever, we see it as a place where emotions are born. So how much do you think this language that we hold on to is influencing more than our thought, but it's influencing our emotions in a sense that we try to belong to something so strongly, and that's where the thought comes from, that I must protect it, you don't tell me. But there is an emotional attachment that the language works on you, something like that. How would you?
I think it's a fascinating example of how the colonized fail to see the ways that they have been colonized in. I'll give you another example. I have a friend in the end of the bush, in the middle of the bush in Australia, who came to me once and told me, I'm so happy now. We got rid of that white fellow. White fellow means a non-Aboriginal, like white. It could also be like an Australian who is Indian, we got rid of that white fellow, and who was the priest in our Christian church. Now I'm the priest. And I say to myself, wait a second, but you're a priest in an Anglican church. I mean, in a church that is the colonizer's church. Mm-hmm. He doesn't see it. He sees it as getting rid of the white fellow priest. He is already brainwashed to believe in Il Padre, Il Figlio, e lo Spirito Santo, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, if I follow the Italian. And another example that you've just beautifully given us, like, I want them to know that it was the belly, the seat of emotions. No, it's a heart. How do you know? We are the Aboriginal people. You're not Aboriginal, but I know the language obviously better than them, hopefully not for too long, because I want some Aboriginal people to outsmart me because it's their language. And they say it's a hard because of the colonizers' language, namely English, but they're not aware of it. And this is something that you told me earlier, like mathematics, nobody understands anything about it anyway, but language, everybody knows. But not everybody knows the nitty-gritty. In fact, very, very few people have linguistic perspicacity. I would argue that many linguists even fail to have that perspicacity needed for linguistics, let alone people who have never studied linguistics. Some of them, by the way, are extremely insightful. So, for example, Stephen Fry, my friend, he definitely has a profound linguistic understanding. And I did not even ask him whether he studied linguistics. I don't think it matters. I mean, if somebody is very, very clever, and if somebody is very linguistically advanced, then they can be linguists. So it's not necessarily whether you studied or whether you did not study, but most people do not have it. And the Barngarla people, when they said, no, it's the heart, and then I explained to them they got it from the colonizers' language, etc. The point, though, is that whatever the custodians, decide is the right thing to do. I can inspire, I can scientifically describe, I can consult, I can tell about, what it means, etc., but I cannot decide for them. They are at the wheel. And this is why a revivalist must have balls of steel. And when I say balls of steel, I don't mean you need to be a man. You can be a woman. Like, Golda Meir, she was the prime minister in Israel. They said she's the only person with balls in the... So balls in a metaphorical sense, not testicles. You need to have balls of steel. You need to have a heart of gold, because it's, if you don't have a heart of gold, you will never survive. And you need to have the patience of a crocodile or of a saint. Crocodiles are very, very patient. They can wait for you for 4 days. Right. They can look at you for 4 days, and then after 4 days they attack. If you're on a tent, you say, oh, nobody attacked me until now, it's okay. No, they will attack you after 4 days. Crocodile. And the fourth thing, unfortunately, you need to have the willingness or the humility, the humbleness to serve as a punch bag. Because when you work with people who are especially disadvantaged or unprivileged, poor, I'm not saying, there might be some minorities who are very rich, I'm sure there are, but usually I work with kind of miserable, in quotation marks, poor people who have been screwed by colonizers, etc. There is a lot of ressentiment.
Trust issues.
Say it again?
They'll have some trust issues, for the lack of a better word.
Not trust as much as resentment. Yeah, they trust me wholeheartedly, but they resent some other people. But it will be projected towards whoever is around. It's a little bit like if you go to a house where they're fighting, then you suddenly come, they will kind of punch you because who else can they punch?
No, I understand.
So look, it's not easy, but it's necessary. And I would like to tell your friends or your followers or the audience that if you are good at foreign language learning, which means if you have 7 characteristics, because you need 7 characteristics for foreign language learning: mathematicity, musicality, outstanding memory, high IQ, high EQ, shamelessness, and motivation. If you have these 7 characteristics, you're good at foreign language learning. Consider learning one language. I'm not saying you can learn many languages. You know, I'm fluent in 13 languages and I know many others. Consider learning one language that is dead or sleeping or dreaming beauty, whatever you want to call it, extinct. Learn one language out of all the languages you learn, and then do it together with the community, with the custodians. Of course, if they don't want you to learn, don't learn, because this is not a laboratorial endeavor. This is something you do with community. I don't believe in, you know, like armchair linguistics. You know, there are many linguists. You ask me why some linguists believe like that, while some linguists, yeah, there are many armchair linguists. What is an armchair? Like philosophers of language often are armchair linguists. I'm not saying that it's bad. You know, I love armchairs, but when I do linguistics, I dirty my hands. Yeah. I go to the bush. I get, I don't know if you can see it, but I saw a snake in the middle of nowhere in the bush after a meeting with Aboriginal people, and I fell and I destroyed my hand, etc. This is what I meant. I'm not saying you cannot fall from your armchair. It happened to me.
No, Professor Zuckermann, the thing is, even if someone, you are suggesting people should try to revive a language that is sleeping, a language that is dormant, or a language that is, you know, as you call them, sleeping beauties, dreaming beauties. But even if it is just someone trying to understand their own language, only just understand how they speak. See, because just now you explained something very complicated to me, and you used, of course, words for it, and you dependent on my ability to understand those words in order to understand what you were essentially communicating, which was these people have resistance towards me, not because they do not trust me, but because they are projecting their dislike for someone else, the colonizer, so to speak, and because I look a little bit like them, the projection comes, and as a teacher, I must have patience. So this road that you have mapped out, I get it, but it's a complicated road. See, and a lot of times I have personally experienced that in this area here, and sometimes this area here, they're not linked. So what happens is, because things become a little hazy, because what you explain so simply, because you're in the job, you're experiencing it, you're able to articulate your experience properly. Oftentimes it's here that the haze begins, and then it is not able to come out straight here, and it might lead to conflict. And it is language can provoke you, language can empathize, language can sympathize, language can turn cold towards you, sorry. So what is it that people, everyday people, if there are some steps, somebody who's not, say, a linguist, but since you've been working with language so closely, and what steps would you tell them just to, because say, Professor Jordan Peterson says, in order to understand your thought, you should write. So that is, how many follow it, how many don't, that is not the question. The point is, it is a very workable insight. You can write things down. That's why people have diaries anyway. Do you have, as a linguist, any insights on what I can do, someone who's just going about my day, and in order to take my language, how I speak seriously and how I listen also seriously? What is it? Some steps to practice? Are there some insights to act on?
So just explain to me, Disha. So again, what should you do in order to achieve what? What is your goal?
To speak the words that come out of my mouth, irrespective of the fact whether I'm a linguist, a non-linguist, or even an enthusiast of language, just a regular person. But
wait a second. But some linguists are horrible expressors. They do not know how to express themselves. I know many linguists who are horrible lecturers, and they're horrible in explaining their thoughts. Whereas I know other people who are not linguists, who have a clarity of mind and a clarity of thought, which is very apparent when they speak. They use risque language, which is very good for expressing what you feel and what you know, like one of my great disappointments at my university was that I explained in my class what Oxford English is, and Oxford English has a lot of what I call grin fucking. So grin fucking is grin, G-R-I-N, grin. So like double language. So for example, when somebody tells you, "Oh, how lovely to see you, Disha. I thought you were supposed to be in India." Now, if you're not conversant within this dialect, you might say, "Oh, wow, this guy is very lovely. He loves me. He wants to see me." But actually what it means is fuck off, go back to India. That's what it means. Now, I use the term fuck off in class. It doesn't matter. Somebody complained, not a student, absolutely not a student, because the students love me. Somebody complained, doesn't matter. Some pooh-bah, you know this expression, pooh-bah, it's like somebody like a head of school invited me and said, "Look, we have received complaints that you use the F word in class." I said, "Excuse me? Are you fucking serious?" And they say, yes, you're not allowed to use the F word. I said, "Why not? I'm explaining what the actual meaning is of this expression. I cannot use some other words that are not the actual meaning." So the expression has a literal meaning, that's a semantics if you want, and it has an actual meaning, that's a pragmatics. So this person said, "Well, you might use something, I don't know what they said, but anyway, something that nobody, or no foreigner in my class would have understood." I have many foreign students as well. They don't speak Australian English. Point of the matter, when you explain, for example, I taught at Cambridge. When in Cambridge, somebody said, "This is a brave proposal," what it means is that this is you're insane. This is a horrible proposal. Or, you know, somebody told me, "I don't understand." They told me, I asked them something, and they rejected my question. I mean, my request. And then at the end, they said, "Would you please do not hesitate to contact us whenever you have any further query or request." And then I answered. So I asked another one, and they said, "No, but would you please?" So every time, so I don't understand. They told me to ask them again, but I told them, "No, this means to fuck off. This is the way they say fuck off," because in England, especially in the upper echelons, they would never tell you to fuck off like that.
Politely decline. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And by the way, they are the masters of that. So this is what we call the redundancy. We talked about redundancy. Of course, it's redundant. I mean, it's much easier to say fuck off, and it's. But would you please kindly, you know? Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is that clarity of mind and clarity of expression. Firstly, it is something that some people have and some people do not have. I'm happy to tell you, Disha, that from my 8 years in Oxford and in Cambridge, I met numerous Indians, and for some reason I remember many female ones, who had a great clarity of mind and a great clarity of expression. And I asked myself, I remember, I mean, this is just, I'm telling you the truth. I remember I asked, well, why, despite the accent, which is obvious, why are they so clear? They reminded me a little bit of myself, because I'm very clear when I speak. If my belief is that if I cannot explain in a very clear way a thought, it means that I'm a fuckwit. You know, it means that I actually do not fathom that thought enough.
Completely.
Well, And by the way, there are some people who do not know how to express themselves, and they will tell you, no, it's because their thoughts are very complex and all this bullshit. But it's bullshit, of course. The point of the matter, I asked myself, I don't even remember the names, but I was at St. Hugh's College, Oxford. I had a very impressive Indian person from, I said, is it because they come from a private school, which is very advanced? Is it because, I only see the very best because I'm in Oxford and Cambridge? Is it because there is something in the way that Hindi or that makes you, it's a little bit like in German, you have trennbar verbs. So you can say, ich mache ta 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 an. So I switch on the ta ta ta, but they say the on, they say at the end of the sentence, not at the beginning. So you never know whether they're going to switch it on or off until they finish the sentence. So then they say, oh, therefore you need to be very patient and you need to say, all this. So they say, yeah, we are very advanced. Look, there are many etymologies here. I remember in Germany, they told me, oh, you're a Jew, you're a thief. I said, why? Because in Hebrew, the word for key is mafteach. In Arabic, it's muftach, by the way, which means to open. And in German, it's Schlüssel, which is from schließen, which means to close. So we Germans, we close the gates, and you Jews, you open the gates. They have all these kind of etymologies about why do you open and we close. Look, there is a lot of etymologies, etc.
But Professor, there is beauty here. In language itself, on the table of language, you can both open and close. They both exist.
Exactly. And
the clarity, I want you to complete that. What answer did you get when you looked into it?
Yeah, so look, clarity of mind is something that I believe is one of the most important assets that a person has. I have 3 boys. I don't have a daughter. I have 3 sons. And I told them, your tangibles are bullshit. Whether you have a robot, they're very much into robotics, whether you have a robot, whether you have the chess thing, whether you have the books, it's nothing. The only thing that matters is your clarity of mind, which is inside your brain. And it doesn't matter where you will go. You will go to India, you'll go to China, you'll go to, it doesn't matter. If you have the clarity of mind, you can then, be charismatic. You can communicate properly without misunderstandings. There's so many misunderstandings in the world that are based on cross-cultural miscommunication. Sometimes it's on purpose. I've just seen Putin and Macron meeting, and they had this table which was, I don't know how many meters. He's on the other side of the, it's unbelievable. I don't know if you saw it. It's kind of shocking. But of course, maybe Putin wanted to show him that, he's far away. So it's not like stupidity. It's like on purpose. It's like
symbolic.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, there might be some cultures that they believe that, you should be far away because of coronavirus, so you should not get close, etc., which is very, very unfortunate. And, with the coronavirus, the fact that many children in the world do not see the face and the mouth and what people say. I'm not talking about deaf people. For them, it's detrimental because they cannot read the lips. I'm talking about non-deaf people too. It is horrible because you need to learn the cues from the other person, even without the language. There are many cues. So now I'm doing smizing. You know what to smize is?
No.
Smize. If I have a mask, then I want you to see that I'm smiling with my eyes because you cannot see my smile. Mm-hmm. You understand? So because many people speak with a mask, it's ridiculous. You cannot see me. So I need to know how to smize, to smile and eyes, smile and eyes to smize. This is a portmanteau blend, like spoon and fork, spork, like, motor and hotel, motel.
Got it. Yeah.
So smiles. So I think that in order to have clarity of expression, the first thing you need is clarity of thought. If you are very confused, think why. Why are you confused? You might be depressed. You know, like depressed people, you know, they just cannot, they think about many other people, many other things. I don't know. I mean, you might want to improve the way you look at the world, you know, like maybe, you know, and then in order to express what you have, so, I mean, you need firstly to diagnose, to identify, is it clarity, is it lack of clarity of expression or lack of clarity of thinking? By the way, these are two different things. Some people have bad thinking. I mean, it's enough to look at history, you know, people who, let's hope it will not be in the future, you know, like somebody by mistake pressing the atomic bomb, you know, I mean, like, so maybe they say, I'm going to die soon, so I don't care. Boom, you know, like, so this is clarity of thinking with the big picture, But sometimes if you tell me that you know people who have the clarity of thought, but they don't have the clarity of expression, definitely, if you have a language that has a script, write down your thoughts and then play with the thoughts. You see, I do it without writing. I do it in my mind. So when I go and give a lecture, it's all the lecture is already in my mind. I don't need to write. However, I do use PowerPoint presentation for my students because I want them also to use their eyes. And for some students, it helps because they hear, but they also see. They see, for example, a painting or they see a video that, you know, they understand exactly what it is like. So it is true. If you write down, it's not enough. You then need to properly restructure it so it makes sense. Divide everything into three. Why should we revive languages? I have three reasons: ethical, aesthetic, and utilitarian. Let's start with the ethical. The ethical has to do with what is right. Let's talk about the aesthetic. The aesthetic has to do with what is beautiful. Let's talk about the utilitarian. The utilitarian has to do with what is socially beneficial, for example, economically, to society. Let's discuss the ethical. Languages in the world were killed, linguicided by colonizers. We have the moral obligation, the deontological, moral, philosophical obligation to reclaim these languages simply because they were killed. This is a moral reason for language revival. There was a guy in 1844. His name was Anthony Forster. He was in South Australia, just where I am right now. And he said in 1843, the natives would be sooner civilized if their language was extinct. This is an ideology of linguicide, language killing, just like genocide is people killing, linguicide, language killing. This is the ethical reason why we must revive Sleeping Beauty languages. The aesthetic reason is very simple. The more languages we have, the more diversity we have, it's aesthetically pleasing. It's just like I love my cheeses. You might be lactose intolerant. I love my cheeses. If I go to the market and they say, sorry, sir, no more chabichou, no more roquefort, no more gorgonzola, I'm pissed off. I want my cheeses. I believe in cheeses. This is aesthetic. A world with many languages, with new diversities, because when you revive a language, you end up with a new diversity, because the language revived will not be the same. The revival language will not be the same as the language with the original language. Yeah, there will be a lot of mishmash and cross-fertilization. And the utilitarian reason, which is the third reason, always divide your argument into three, is simply that language reclamation results in empowerment, in less people committing suicide, in less people going to jail, because people feel better about themselves and about each other. They're liberated. It gives them a sense of identity. Their ancestors are happy, in the words of an Aboriginal friend of mine who told me that after I taught her language, the Barngarla language. So coming back to your question, I've just given you an example of how you have a question, you divide the answer into three, and then you say, I'm going to tell you 1, 2, 3. 1 means that, 2 means that, 3 means that. And then you give one example for the 1, 1 for the 2, 1 for the 3. And then you summarize. It's clarity, and it makes an impression on the hearer. Now, in my case, I do it naturally. I don't need to write it. But if you feel that you do not have it naturally, you can work on it. Just as I said earlier, that you need seven characteristics for foreign language learning. Now, I'm lucky, I have the 7, but if you don't have musicality, you can actually improve your musicality. If you don't have memory, there are ways to improve your memory. There are ways to improve your memory. If you're not good at mathematics, there are ways to improve. I mean, this is what some people teach.
Yeah.
They teach how to memorize, all these stories, mnemonics. And so there are ways to improve what the components are. If you're lucky and you have all of them, great, you're very lucky. Why don't you become a professor of linguistics or endangered languages professor? So endangered that, by the way, I'm the only such professor in Australia.
Right.
I think your dog tells you that we need to finish.
That was lovely chatting with you, lovely talking to you, Professor Zuckermann. Thank you so much for your time. You were quite liberal, and with all your explanations, I'm sure it's going to be helpful for those who hear this. And I hope, the desire is that people can start to take, starting with myself, my husband, if we can all start taking languages, we do start taking them seriously, and find the beauty that's hidden in them, the ethics that's hidden in them, the meaning that's hidden in them, and I think it'll be useful for us. Yes.
Oh, it was such a pleasure, Disha. I really enjoyed talking to you. I love your questions. You're very clever.
Okay, Professor Zuckermann, maybe in the future we'll see you again. Take care and all the best.
Take care. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
My conversation with Professor Zuckermann showed me the important role language plays in our life, and how losing one's language is a real thing, and that perhaps the consequences of such a loss cannot always be calculated, even by those who were forced to give up their mother tongue. It showed me how learning different languages and understanding our own can add to the quality of our thinking, give us new perspectives, and help us belong to our world with more ease and confidence. It will be wonderful to know your thoughts on the conversation, and if it inspired your worldview in any way. Thanks for being here. I will see you soon with another interesting mind, demystifying another interesting topic. Until then, take care.